The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order! The Reels of Justice, Hell on Reels, is now in possession. Grudge Big Ben Haslar presiding. Will you all please dies for the horrible Grudge Haslar?
Thank you, Scaretaker. Today we're hearing the case of The People versus Skinamarink, a 2022 horror movie about two children that find themselves alone in their house with no windows, doors, or parents as a malevolent presence plagues them. This is Hell on Reels, by the way. For those of you unfamiliar with our I did not, I skipped over it. For those of you unfamiliar with our spooky court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of the sin of being a bad movie. And if so, it shall be cast for all eternity into the fiery pits of movie hell, upon which this courthouse just so happens to be built. Mr. Bouncin Bobby LePire, you are representing the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
My opening statement is a bit of a history lesson of how I came to see the movie, to understand what I knew before I watched it. Ooh. A friend of mine texted me if I was free to see something. I said sure, and he named a few titles. At the time, it was the Gerard Butler movie Plane, Megan, and then an indie horror with a weird name that begins with S. That is a direct quote. That is how he framed it to me. I gave him a time to meet up and agreed to the weird titled movie. We get tickets, so it's not until 30 seconds to a minute before entering the theater did I know what the title for what I was seeing was. That was Skinamarink. I knew even less about the plot. And dear God, I wish it stayed that way. In my film threat review for the film, I call this one of the worst movies of all time and a wet paper towel of cinematic expression. I'm here to prove why that is the case, and why this movie should be banished from everybody's memories ever and into the pit of fiery hell upon which this court has been built.
And how was Megan? Did you see that one?
I really enjoyed Megan. I thought Megan was good.
Oh, good. Thank you, Mr. LePire. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mr. Maynard Bangs. Please present your opening statement.
I'd also like to express my fondness for that particular film, Megan.
He's never seen Megan in his life.
Your Honor, distinguished members of the court, Kyle Edward Ball's 2022 experimental horror film, Skinamarink, is very dark. It's mostly lit by analog televisions flickering with Max Fleischer cartoons, and that's when it's lit at all. It's grainy, the result of a filter placed over the video in post-production. It's confusing, featuring what one might generously call a threadbare plot, almost never showing the faces of its characters as a rule. It's quiet. The dialogue is frequently inaudible, instead appearing on screen in subtitles, except when it's not. It's 100 minutes of muddy, prolonged, tight shots of old Legos and toys scattered around the floor at ground level, or low-angle shots looking up towards the ceiling without anyone speaking, and for long stretches of time, nothing happens. And it's wound up as one of the most polarizing films to come out in recent memory. Some people think it's one of the scariest movies they've ever seen. The few grainy images one can make out permanently burned into the back of their eyelids. And some people think it's boring. What's the truth? Well, that's what we're here to decide. But it's imperative we understand, at this point, nothing we saw on the screen was put there accidentally. It's not like Ball just forgot to light the scenes, or like he just forgot to keep the focus of the camera on its primary subjects, or like he accidentally slipped and applied that grainy filter in post. Everything we see is deliberate, a deliberate, intentional choice made at the conscious expense of entertainment, made at the conscious expense of wide commercial appeal in order to craft a specific mood, a feeling. This is an exploration, a personal journey and discovery through the medium of film, an effort to conjure, to recreate a memory locked in our brains since youth. So, welcome to my nightmare. I think you're gonna like it. I think you're gonna feel all right at home. Welcome to my nightmare. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa.
I'm sorry, I'm dense. You're going to need to explain that reference to me. Maybe on your time.
Yeah, it's an Alice Cooper song that he literally quoted in last week's movie, Your Honor.
I blanked that one out, fortunately, and I'm much better for it.
Yeah, he just did his Tom Brokaw impression to say it for some reason.
Mr. LePpears, you may present your first exhibit.
After that opening statement from my colleague, do I need to do anything? He just listed all the reasons that the movie's awful. Like, case dismissed, as Ryan Luis Rodriguez says.
No.
Wait, no, don't actually dismiss the case. We have an hour.
I'll let you proceed.
So the history lesson I gave in my opening statement is a little important, because about a week or so after seeing the movie, I met up with a friend for dinner to expressly talk about Skinamarink, because he really liked it. And I think it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. In my film threat review, I call it one of the worst movies ever made, and not in a so bad it's good kind of way.
Objection, Your Honor. This is the second shameless plug of Film Threat that Mr. LePpears
He gets three. He gets three. It's in his contract. He has one more to go.
Not too many more, though, Bobby. We had to talk about something at the end of the show.
Yeah, you better save it. I would save it.
And in discussing it, he wrote up 3 movies to see if I liked them, all of which I care for to varying degrees. Mad God, The Lighthouse, and Eraserhead. Each one's weird. Each one doesn't necessarily have a story in how you would traditionally define that. Each one doesn't necessarily focus on a character's journey or growth within whatever's happening on screen, but they all have something you can grasp onto that helps ground whatever weird, strange, horrific, bizarre things are happening. And that context is what's missing from anything in Skinamarink. Outside of saying 1995 in the beginning, nothing here makes sense in terms of how or why they're happening. It's one thing to not hold your audience's hand and spoon feed them everything. It's another thing to give them so little context that you could state, well, it could be this thing or that thing or this third thing equally. And the only reason somebody would argue it is because they think it might be something else. Nothing in the movie says it's not something from an alternate dimension colliding into this house, and that's why the things are reappearing or disappearing. There's nothing that says the dad summoned a demon and the demon took him away. There's no context for what's going on, and that's super frustrating. More on that in a little bit, though.
Yeah, I'd like to pass to the defense. Mr. Bangs, LePpears has one question. Just what the hell is going on?
It's a good question.
I'll probably get into that more when it's my time, because I have my own little history lesson. But first thing we'll just talk about, is a movie bad because it doesn't necessarily have a plot? Well, one, since Mr. BBL likes to quote Ryan Luis Rodriguez will tell you a movie does not need a story to be good. He would point you to any David Lynch movie to show this. And comparisons to David Lynch's work has been drawn to Skinamarink, particularly Rabbits. And Ball himself credits Lynch among his influences for this kind of work. And Lynch, as you mentioned, is a guy who's known for making things that don't make sense. So
I'm not asking
to say that there's, but now I here's what I'm going to say. There is a plot. To say there's no plot's unfair, right? There is a beginning, right? We meet a boy and a girl in a house that definitely has doors and at least one parent. And then there's the middle, right? That's where the conflict comes in. They lose the doors and then they lose the parent. And then eventually the boy loses the girl too, because she loses her eyes and her mouth. And then finally we have an end. This is all a progression. There's just a little boy and whatever supernatural being's been fucking with him this entire time. So to say there's no plot, to say the situation of the little 4-year-old boy that this movie is about doesn't change from the beginning of this movie to the end of this movie is ludicrous, because by the end he's in some sort of eternal hell where he's maybe being killed over and over and seemingly never going to get out of. His situation absolutely changes. Is it a slow burn? Positively. It's like one of the slowest things ever. If it was any slower, of a burn, it'd be out.
I'd like to hear your point.
It is moving.
I didn't say there wasn't a plot. I said there's no context, and that's different. Right?
I have context, but I would like to
look at something like The Lighthouse or Mad God, which really just hinge on the characters within reacting to whatever is going on them. It's not a plot in the traditional sense. It's not a story in a linear progression. And there are amazing movies out there that don't necessarily have plots. In Roger Ebert's review of, I think it was Mulholland Drive, he talks about how he thinks the ending might be a little bit of a cheat, but he doesn't care about that because the journey he just went on was so interesting for him that even if this doesn't really work, or he doesn't think the characters actually end up in a different place than they were in the beginning of the movie, the movie still totally works. So you can have great movies without a traditional story. What you need is context, and there's none here. This could be a demon brought about by somebody in the household summoning it. This could be a powerful entity from another realm crashing its world into their world, and that's why the doors are and everything's disappearing. It could be a shared nightmare between the siblings. We don't have enough context to know. You gotta meet any movie halfway, right? Like,
no, I mean, so is your issue that the film is not being spoon feeding you explanations? Because I think
that
one
it
of
has
because what I'd say is the success of this film
has
its
no
vagueness.
explanation. No, the vagueness only works if there's still grounding for interpretation that makes sense with what you've seen. Here, you can apply anything you want to it, and as long as it makes some semblance of sense as to why things are reappearing and disappearing and yada yada, it works. It's different when there's nothing to grasp onto versus, okay, well, it's open for interpretation, but it all still makes sense within the worlds, within the movie of whatever movie, that world that we're talking about. It still has to make some sort of sense, and this doesn't have context whatsoever.
The director has intentionally kept some of the meaning of it vague, though, too. The director has intentionally kept some of it vague. But I think your idea that it needs to all be concrete is especially not very valuable to me in horror. I think keeping it vague and allowing us to paint our own answers onto it, to paint our own fears onto it, allows it to achieve its goal, which is to be a manifestation, representation of fear.
Mr. Maynard, I believe you're going to expand on this later, so you would have a chance to rebut. I think we'll be dragged into this point again and again. If you would like to present the second point.
Okay. Lost my place. Sorry about that. I do have a question about the budget for this movie. Supposedly, it was $15,000, not $1,500, not $1,500, $15,000. I don't know where that money went. There's a total of 5 actors: the kids, mom, dad, the voice of the weird entity thing that shows up later in the film. Then there's a sizable amount of Legos, a television set, a bed, and a couch.
I can tell you a lot of the toys are Ball's childhood toys. The home you're seeing is his childhood home. That is the home he grew up in. So
that's the iPhone this was clearly shot on, and
it was actually shot on
brand new.
Most of the money was that camera.
Is far too expensive for what's seen on screen. Now, mind you, a budget of any size does not make or break a movie. But when one is questioning where the money went, no matter how big or small that amount is, instead of being invested in the happenings of the plot, that's always a bad sign. And when I first watched this, because I've only seen this twice in theaters, and then for this podcast, I keep just trying to figure out where this money disappeared to. It's not on screen at all. And the fact that he's apparently spent so much money on a camera when I could remake Skinamarink using my phone right now if I was so inclined. I don't hate myself enough for that. I promise you I won't. But I could. It would cost me $0 outside of the time it would cost.
Well, there's craft services.
One, I'd like to say this film was crowdfunded, right? And so where this money went is really a concern between the filmmaker and the people who invested in it. They seem to be happy with their return. He already had a following, which I'll go into in my thing. But he had a following. He had an audience that knew the type of stuff he made.
For those people.
And they knew the type of stuff he made. This is exactly his oeuvre. This is exactly what they wanted to see him make. Now, $15,000, you got to pay people. You do got to dress people. Those doors and how they disappear, I'm assuming he's putting some sort of false walls up to block them. $15,000 goes really fast. Now, you want to talk money. Now, it's happy chance that once this film finally hit theaters, managed to make $2 million back. So $2 million under $15,000. Of all the films to not complain about money, this has got to be really a thumbs up money-wise. This shows you when you have smarts and a good idea, you don't need a lot of money to make your movie.
Everyone see Psycho 8 2 coming out soon. Bobby LePire, please present your
That's your one. That's your one, Ben. You only have 2 more for Psycho 8 plugs.
Wait, does that count too?
No, he has 3.
I only needed the one. I only needed the one.
I've just used 2 of them.
Dang it, we're out. Sorry, Edison.
The next one is on the technical side of things. For one, I absolutely refuse to call how Skinamarink was shot cinematography, as that feels like a betrayal to actual directors of photography out there who know how to create art and lighting that doesn't stem from a dim flashlight or a glowing TV set. Spooky. God damn. Seriously, what's meant to be creepy,
objection,
scary,
you don't find it
frightening?
spooky, but it absolutely is an important core idea to Ball and his work. For some reason, cartoons playing at night on his TV scares the shit out of him.
That sounds like between him and his therapist, that is not a movie.
The objection is sustained. That sort of thing is a little bit subjective. Bobby LePire, do you have any further exhibits?
I do, about that same thing, though, because that's all the movie has. The movie has extremely close-up shots. If Ball could do a wide shot, even twice, with characters doing action in that shot at any point, I will die of surprise in his next movie. Okay, just sitting there watching, I will just instantly vanish into the ether, never to be seen from again, because I don't think he's heard of wide shots.
He has heard
the
of
movie
wide
is
shots.
just bad lighting, terrible, obviously overlaid effect of film grain to give it that very kind of old school horror look that just doesn't work for what he's doing. And then it's just the lighting either comes from a flashlight, the TV, or the hallway, and it's just either up at the ceiling, down at the ground, looking at Legos, or occasionally you see feet shuffling around. That's nothing is creepy here because that's all the movie's offering. There's no juxtaposition against normal versus this. It's just this, and that's all there is. And going into that, not knowing it, the movie had a great way of sucking me because there was no expectations whatsoever, right? I hadn't read any reviews. I hadn't seen a trailer. Again, I didn't even know its title till 30 seconds or a minute before walking into the theater to actually watch it. And it failed to suck me in because all it is repeating shots of these things that on their own aren't creepy. in the context of a single scene in, say, I don't know, like a Nightmare on Elm Street, for example. And they're widely different horror films, kinds of horror. I realize this. But like if you have a close up of something that's so extreme that you're looking at just this little bit of the house, it could work in context because you have everything else going on. But here, all this are those close ups. It's never scary. And part of that leads to like editing confusion, but I'll pause there so we can rebut and I'll move on to my next point.
Yeah, Mr. Bangs, are we too close to everything?
No, I think at this point, I think I just have to enter into my points and contextualize this for Mr. LePpears. So I'm going to back up just a little bit because I want to give you a little history on this filmmaker, Kyle Edward Ball, right? So now the origins for Skinamarink lie in Ball's YouTube channel. He started in 2017. It's called Bite-Sized Nightmares. And what he would ask is he'd ask viewers to submit examples of their childhood nightmares, and he would loosely recreate them. Now, one of the most interesting videos is the very first one. It's only entitled Nightmare 1. And it's seemingly the only video I could find of watching most of his channel that actually represents one of Ball's own nightmares. It goes, I was 7 or 8 or so, and the lights are off, and I'm watching television. I remember having a very strong sense that someone was on the loose, and this person was dangerous. And at 26, I still remember that nightmare out of any of the others I've had. It's the first video on the channel. It's the kicking off point. So what is Ball working through? What kind of nightmare did he have at 8 years old that still bothers him enough at 26 to begin recreating not only his own nightmare, but others as well? Now, what you'll find is if you watch these videos, the core ideas for Skinamarink are gathered over time as Ball discovered the overlapping concepts across many people's nightmares. You'll see his style become more minimalistic, more representative of what we see in Skinamarink. Watch his first video. It's overproduced as hell. It's it's very brightly lit. It's winding. There's no grain. He adds these things as he goes on, as he learns that this reminds him, this lo-fi, grainy picture sense reminds him of his childhood fears, reminds him of lying in bed all night looking at shadows. And that is the hallmark of this channel, is this guy who is still obsessed with that static television. Now let's go through some of these videos that he does too. Nightmare 10, Check Upstairs it's called, concerns the disappearance of the dreamer's family and a menacing presence. Nightmare 18, called Be Asleep, features a being without eyes or a mouth. Nightmare 24, entitled Mom, has a long shot of the back of the mother's head. We never see the face. Nightmare 34, Nursery, has disembodied, distant laughter. And you can go over and over and you'll see the little things that are in Skinamarink are scattered throughout.
So
what is
Ball is so unoriginal, he steals other people's nightmares to make his own piece of shit movie?
He's synthesizing other people's nightmares. He's gathering their anecdotal experiences, because dreams and nightmares there's entire devotions to medical science to trying to interpret and understand them. I'm not even going to really try to start. It's interesting that he found symbolism that overlapped that professional dream interpreters will find. For instance, the boogeyman is very commonly known, like in Jungian psychology, as the shadow, the other, what we don't want to be. We project negative things externally. And so a boogeyman running around your dreams and nightmares, even representing internal problems, is very indicative of like real dream research. Now, my point here is that this just started, I think, as a side hobby. This guy, I think he did a music video in 2014, but he's not a filmmaker. He had a YouTube channel where he could start exploring because he's trying to work through something. He reached out to people, asking them for their nightmares. They shared them willingly because they wanted to see them filmed. He got, not much of a following, probably 2,000 people. And then in 2020, he produces Heck. Heck is his proof of concept. It's a 30-minute video, and if you watch it, it's very Skinamarink. It's got the lo-fi. It's still a little bit more produced than Skinamarink. And so even in those couple of years, he still learns to peel it back even more. There's this grit, like just that grainy lo-fi is not trying to be, it's trying to be indicative of photos of that time, because those are our memories. We remember video in lower fi from back then with lower fi sound. all of it's a very conscious choice in trying to recreate it. Now, the reason I touch on this, you talked about the cinematography. I love the cinematography in this movie. You ask, why are we looking at the ceiling? Just last night, I was watching this movie for my third time in preparation of this case.
Because you hate yourself, I know.
At 4 in the morning, and I have to go to bed, and I turn off every light in the house, and I have to walk up to my bedroom in the dark, and I was scared because of this dumb movie that put all these shadows and ideas in my head. And then I'm lying in bed, and you know what I realized what I was looking at? The ceiling, because I'm lying up. So every time you're looking up at the ceiling, you're not looking at the POV of the child, right? They're not physically looking up at the ceiling at that moment. But the angles are inspired by angles that children would look at in bed. If a child's scared, they avert their eyes. They don't look directly at who they're speaking to. They look off at walls. They look down. They look away. So if you're trying to create moments of fear and remind people of moments of fear, having long shots looking in corners and down and away from what's going on is the right way to shoot this. Looking at low angles.
I would like
to hear from the prosecutor.
And I want to pass it on to you. Is someone said that a lot of the low shots were what would happen if your toddler took your phone and started snapping shots with your cell phone. You would come up and you'd find a bunch of low close-up shots of your Legos and toys, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a movie from the perspective of the 4-year-old protagonist. Nothing we understand in the film is beyond what a 4-year-old could understand. He's 4. He has no idea what's going on, and neither do you.
Take a breath, Mr. Maynard. Take a breath. All right.
Here's the thing with it being from the point of view of the child. I do agree that what's happening is filtered through the siblings, specifically Kevin, through the siblings' perspective. But in terms of the cameras and stuff, unless you're talking like a Maniac with Elijah Wood or a Hardcore Henry kind of a situation where it's all first person, you can break away from that in order to give, once again, what's missing, context to what's going on. As in the opening of this movie, which is 4 minutes long of absolutely nothing going on. One of the kids, I think it's Kevin, I don't know for certain, has to go through the hallway, turns on the light, knocks on the door, dad comes out, and from like 30 feet back is how we're watching this. They go into a separate room, turn on a light there, do something, leave to their respective
bedrooms. Are you complaining
bedrooms.
about a 30-foot wide back wide shot when you're just asking this dude to do wide shots?
Because it's so far back that we can't do anything with it. It's not even.
Come on, Your Honor.
No. Really, there's a time to do wide shots to establish how the living room looks. There's a time to do medium shots, and there's a time for close-ups. He only does wide shots when the action's happening so far away you can't see it. I don't know if you ever saw the fucking Wiz, that terrible adaptation of the musical. But part of the complaint of that movie is everything's in wide shot. So it's really boring to look at because all the actors are far away. And it's true. All the actors here, when they would have their face seen by the camera in a medium or close-up shot, the camera is so far away, you can't see their face.
But the point of the close-up shots is to disorient you, Bobby. It is to make you feel claustrophobic, and it is to take away context.
Claustrophobic.
It's supposed to make you feel trapped
I felt bored
and
confused as to why this is what I'm looking at. Not confused because I'm scared of what's happening. No, not in the slightest. I was bored.
Maybe you don't have nightmares like this, but clearly enough people have nightmares like this that started following his channel, gave him money to make a proof of concept and then a full movie. And then, so this movie leaked during a film festival and just caught word of mouth on social media that ended up leading it to it getting a theatrical release. That's an organic thing that happened. That wasn't a planned thing. You couldn't plan it. Go ahead and leak whatever indie movie you want from a film festival right now. It won't become big and make $2 million. These guys, Ball dialed into something. He got something right. People saw his images and went, I know that. I saw that. I remember that. I'm one of them. Maybe someone on the Jurors one of them. Enough people were enough of them that this movie is polarizing.
As I was saying earlier, you have to meet any movie halfway, right? If I'm watching, I don't know, Mallrats, right? It's unfair of me to expect it to be as dramatically and emotionally investing as Past Lives, the best film I've seen this year. If I'm watching Past Lives, it's unfair of me to expect it to make me crack up and laugh at the same way Mallrats does, right? But the movie also has to meet you halfway. If I'm watching a comedy, well, is it actually funny? How many of the jokes work? Does it move well? Do some of the jokes overstay their welcome? That kind of thing. If I'm watching a drama, am I invested in the characters? Do I want to see what's going to happen to them? Do I hope they overcome whatever challenge presents themselves in that drama? If I'm watching a horror movie and I'm not scared in the least, that's a problem. The movie didn't meet me halfway.
I want to question your empathy to not being scared in this movie. This movie terrifies me. These children are the epitome of absolutely helpless. These kids have no chance. I mean, there's no point where they could fight back. I mean, they're merely hiding, and the being simply allows them to exist as long as he's having fun toying with them. They're always at his mercy. They never have a hope and a chance. And if that suffocating anxiety, it bugged me throughout the whole movie. I mean, they walk in, the parents are asking them to look under beds. These are not things parents should do. The whole thing's screwed up. Where are the parents in the I have memories of stuff like that, of parents just being gone. These are core memories and fears that are clearly not just mine, but are this filmmakers and some of the audiences. So,
Mr. Maynard, do you have any further exhibits before we wrap up? You've been going for a while.
I do. I want to touch on a couple things. Let Bobby rest, and then I'll touch on just a couple tiny points.
He will never.
All right, so going off of what you just said, part of the issue with this movie is its structure. The structure's all wrong here.
How can you say the structure's wrong when the structure is supposed to symbolize or supposed to recreate something without structure, which is a dream, which has no structure?
Hear me out. If it's a nightmare, then this should be labeled a nightmare, but it's not. It's something toying with him, you said. So choose which one it is. It's either something nightmare or something toying with him.
Focus. Something is toying with him in the nightmare. His first video is about his dream, his nightmare, where there's a boogeyman after him in it. And it's a repeated theme throughout these people's dreams of boogeymens and entities, and they still wake up. They're sleeping.
It's those people's dreams on Ball's channel, not in this movie, though.
They're all a synthesis of what he's learned throughout the project. This is the final exam.
He's already presented evidence. He's devolved as a filmmaker. That grain.
Right. I've heard enough of this back and forth. We'll get to that.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say. The structure is all wrong. One point, one of the kids asks, and this is a direct quote from the movie, why is mom crying? Okay. Then some other things happen. The other child then says, I don't want to talk about mom. It's not the evil entity thing. It's not the dad. It's the other child talking about that. One, why wouldn't that moment of why is mom crying? I don't want to talk about mom come right afterwards. That should be a dialogue back and forth, and it's not. There's a minute, 2 minutes in between these two lines of dialogue happening. So why this child's now saying, I don't want to talk about mom, just doesn't make sense. And then it undercuts them trying to figure out why mom is crying and where she is. Later on, we see that moment where they look under the bed, looks up, and it's the mom there again. So who knows what's going on there in terms of like, is that the mom they're talking about? That kind of thing. And because of that, it's just nothing flows in a natural way, even for the poor ineptitude we see of how this film decides to present it all. Nothing actually flows in a way that makes real sense. Now, you can argue dream logic all you want. If you want to scare somebody, if you want to get them invested in the characters enough to fear for these characters' safety, you need context and you need certain things to flow in an order that makes sense.
I'm calling a moratorium on a does this scare you question. I'll let the jury answer if they got scared or not.
Okay, I have
would you like
one
to
more.
rest, Mr. LePpears? Okay.
I have 2 more points real quick, actually.
Tune in next week for part 2 of Skinamarink.
My second to last point is the sound design, which is just truly repellent. Aside from a few public domain songs, again, I question what he spent that money on. There are long stretches of any music. As such, each sound is magnified to the nth degree, and it's off-putting.
That's
much
the
like in the,
point.
but not off-putting in the
Why?
creepy way. It's like in that
It doesn't
stupid
creep
fucking
you
piece of
out.
shit.
It creeps
Order in my
Adam,
court. Order in
the
my court,
viewers
please. This is
out.
the same argument as if it's scary. If the
I
jury finds it
agree.
off-putting, they can design.
My point is it's subjectively effective to several people in the audience, maybe not the prosecutor.
But it's also objectively bad, and this is why. Because when everything's pitched at the same level, you are snuffing out any semblance of eeriness. The Legos being thrown, the couch being dragged, the feet shuffling.
You think the
all
sounds? You're saying the sound design you think is all at the same level?
It's all
voices move throughout the room over and over.
Except for the talking, which inexplicably goes from whispering to slightly above that to non-existent, with random subtitles being used randomly for no reason because I don't know.
It's another intentional choice by Ball. He does the same thing in Hack. He very specifically
because he's a shit filmmaker. I know.
No, he's playing with the concept of subtitles. He liked to use it. The direct quote is he was experimenting with them. And he thought it would be neat where you could hear people talking, but it was so quiet you could only understand them with subtitles. And he said sometimes he just took it out. He literally described it as a fun little process. Here's Your Honor, before we touch on anything, what I want to touch on too is this film was leaked. This film was practically publicly pried from this man, right? I mean, he submitted it to a film festival, but he probably didn't expect it to even get accepted. He probably expected to go on to his YouTube channel where 2,000 people would see it. He wasn't expecting it to have this broad appeal you want it to be.
Well, 2 million of appeal.
He still managed to make money.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite done with the sound design thing. So hear me out.
You know, my nightmare is people endlessly debating Skinamarink.
So when everything's at the same level, except for the talking, which is inexplicable, and the use of subtitles is just something that takes you out. It reminds you you're watching a movie. Therefore, whatever hypnotic spell of eeriness that the movie could potentially have, which it doesn't anyway, once you see the subtitles just appear on screen because they're not there for the rest of the movie, it takes you out of that moment. But more importantly, if certain things were louder than others outside of the dialogue and conversations, it would be more impactful. So when there's a sudden thing, the reason horror movies use those loud noises is because it is jarring and it's a little creepy, and it works in that regard. When everything's at one noise level, then nothing's jarring. Nothing is there to make you take notice because it's all just deafening. It's like in that stupid Adam Wingard Blair Witch sequel remake piece of shit. The wind is so loud in that movie. When that wind is so loud, it's not creepy, it's distracting because you're like, why is the wind that loud? You know what I mean? I
do. And would you like to rest on that point?
I have one more point, and it's the ending, which is the most egregious part of. The sound design was my second last point. That was all sound design. This is my last point. The ending is the most egregious part of this fucking film. Kevin finds himself alone. He sees a distorted face. At least we see it as distorted. I'm unclear if it's distorted to him. And asks, "Who are you?" Much like several scenes of this movie being repeated over and over and over again for no reason, he repeats the question a few times, and the film just fizzles out on that. The film ends on a literal question being unanswered. It's such a fucking cop-out, and it's such a bad metaphor for the fucking boondoggle of stupid that just happened. It hurts my brain that all this buildup of nothing happening to absolutely nothing happening at all. You get no answers. You get nothing. You don't care. Because by that point, all you want is the movie to be fucking over. And it wastes your time because he has to ask that question 3 times before the movie can end.
He only asked it twice.
Your mom twice, will come to make a pardon. Mr. Maynard, you may take the case.
Anyway, I'm gonna, I did get to touch on everything. It's so important that one, Mr. LePpears was unhappy that this thing was open to interpretation. I actually think it's kind of cool.
Not
that
true.
It's vague because
objection. I'm not unhappy it's open to interpretation. I'm unhappy there's no context, so you can apply any interpretation you want to it. There's
and
a big
that's
difference.
still a great thing, and the director enjoys it too. And then, you know, there's tons of interesting fan theories about this, which I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned, why is she crying for mommy here? If you can't tell, these kids, besides this being a nightmare, my turn to speak, Your Honor.
Yeah, order. It's his turn.
You should get the quote right. It's, why is mommy crying? She's not crying for mommy, which is what you said.
No, yeah, why is mommy crying? Yes. The point is, these kids clearly have something going on below this nightmare, right? They clearly, like, kids with healthy, stable parents don't tend to have a bunch of nightmares about abandonment and being left alone and boogeymen coming after them. This is clearly a trauma. These kids clearly come from some sort of an origin of abuse. I don't know how much truth that is in Kyle Ball's history, but a lot of people are pinning these sort of interpretations that there is some sort of, this is a picture of a child's perspective of domestic abuse between a mother and father, the recurrent blood splatters, the mother disappearing and coming back. I don't want to talk about mommy, the screams and pain. There is that. There's also ideas that that Kevin is in a coma after his head injury. So there are interpretations. Now, Mr. LePpears says there's not enough context. Again, this was ripped from the filmmaker. He didn't expect this to go to a wide release, so he probably didn't get to control how it was marketed. I bet he wishes he could have said, "Remember your childhood nightmare," somewhere on a poster. That probably would have been nice. But looking at his history, at his genre, what he worked at, it's so obvious that he worked recreating childhood nightmares. Then he went to Heck, which was his proof of concept, 30 minutes, and he graduates. This is his finale. This is what he finally gets to produce, his nightmare. He has a sister. The age difference is right. It's not vague. He's Kevin. This is his nightmare. He's added some other elements from other people's nightmares that he found common, hoping that something would resonate. And clearly, based on success alone, it was. I also want to touch a little bit on the cartoons that you mentioned earlier.
Does not make it good. And I would like to remind the defense, I didn't see any of the marketing before walking into this theater for the first time.
The film,
and you still would have seen 100 minutes of a terrifying picture of children's fear and anxiety, whatever the cause is. Now, I also just want to highlight the cartoons are actually widely and smartly picked. They're not just random public domain. You have Ib Uwerks. Help me, Ryan. Ib Uwerks.
Iwerks.
Yeah,
he's the animator
Balloonland.
Behind Mickey Mouse and Balloonland, and he went on to do his own.
So they do Balloonland, which is a land of balloon people who are terrorized by a villainous figure, the Pincushion Man. Notice the similarities to the being that's haunting them. You have Max Fleischer's Somewhere in Dreamland, about the adventures of two children in a world of slumbering fantasy, Bobby. So the clues were there. You have Fleischer's The Cobweb Hotel, about a voracious spider who traps honeymooning fly couple in his hotel. The way the children are trapped in the spider's web is the same thing as that. And then, of course, you have Presto Changeo.
Spider? That makes so much
order.
sense.
Merry Melodies Presto Changeo, about a magic, world-altering being, in that case, Bugs Bunny, in his second ever appearance, who can vanish and reappear at will and uses his abilities to torment two unwitting pups. The cartoons are picked for their thematic relationship, especially Dreamland. How much did the director have to go, hey, they're dreaming? You know, spatial things are moving. And I do want to say, as far as dreams go, this is a very lucid dream. Like in my dreams, people's faces change, but they're the same people. Here, it's just sort of a few people disappearing. It's a fairly lucid dream. If you really tried to film one of your dreams, it would be impossible to follow. I honestly feel like I could talk all night about this movie, but I know I don't have time. So, yeah, I'll rest on that, though.
Thank you. Both sides have rested their cases. Mr. LePpears, you may present your closing argument. 1 minute starting now.
This is a true story. That same outing to the theater I mentioned in my opening statement, once the film mercifully concluded, the entire half a dozen or so people in there, this includes myself and my friend, stayed for several minutes to discuss how pointless that was. Everybody in that theater did not care for this movie. And I mean everybody, not a single person up and left. Because I noticed we were in the back of the theater and I would have seen them, but everybody stayed and we all discussed this movie. Not a single one of them enjoyed it. So I guess there's an upside. Director Kyle Edward Ball's film did have a power to unite strangers in hating it together. But it's about nothing. Ooh, it's a dream. You still need context. Give us a day before that, so we kind of have a context for how their home life goes, so I understand why they're dreaming this way. Anything. It's about nothing. It has nothing to say because of how it ends, and it's so incompetently made. It must be guilty and sent into the fiery pit upon which this courthouse is built.
Thank you, Mr. LePpears. Mr. Maynard, please present your closing argument.
We dream. It is good we are dreaming. It would hurt us were we awake. But since it is playing, kill us. And we are playing. Shriek. What harm? That's an excerpt from Emily Dickinson's poem, We Dream. It is good we are dreaming. Skinamarink is a culmination of years of work Ball put into this project. Let's call it coming to grips with his childhood nightmares through film and social media. Whatever it is, it's clearly very personal. And the fact that Skinamarink was filmed in his own home with his own toys makes it even more personal. Now, is Skinamarink slow? Fuck yes. Is it boring? Yeah, it can be, totally. But entertainment wasn't the purpose. It isn't supposed to be fun. It isn't supposed to be lively. The purpose was to capture this sense of childlike fear and anxiety, to recreate this half-forgotten nightmare world of Balls. If we stand here today and say that this film is bad because it refused to entertain, because it refused to conform to something it didn't want to be, if it fails purely because it fails to meet the standards we ascribe to mainstream plot-driven films, we're slamming the door on the wonderful possibilities offered by the medium of film to explore new methods of creating visual and audio representations of art. So, I think if you don't have memories, or if this film doesn't evoke memories in you of your childhood, then consider yourself lucky.
I will. Thank you all. Members of the jury, Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. Can we watch something happy now? Ryan Luis Rodriguez.
It's the best nickname for him I've ever heard in my whole life.
There's only 500 words in the movie. I didn't have a lot to work with.
Excuse me. You have all heard the spooky facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine this film is guilty of the sin of being a bad movie, and will therefore be condemned into the fiery depths of movie hell. The scare taker will take you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Right this way. The door to the deliberation room is just over. Oh, well, it was there just a moment ago. Cross my heart and hope to die.
So did we just teleport in the room, or what happened?
I think so. Well, I am going to pee in a bucket. Unrelated, though.
I had a nightmare that a bottle of sake was drinking me.
Wow. Did not expect this to get so heated. My God, they were clawing each other's eyes out. My God.
They did not respect that gavel.
No, not at all.
No, they did not.
When this movie started, I was on board because it looked like 8mm in scope. I just love the aesthetic so much. And then I started waiting for something to happen. And I don't need a plot, but I do need an incident of some kind. And I did not get a lot of that. There's no reason for this to be 100 minutes long. The Foley work is atrocious. The use of sync sound or lack thereof gave me serious Coleman Francis vibes. And it fails to get much mileage from public domain cartoons. Call me crazy. You got to give me more than heavy breathing for suspense. I cannot believe that this aired in movie theaters. It boggles the mind. But at the same time, I am fascinated by it. And I want to know what this guy does next. Does he actually tell a story? Like, where is the procession from here? Dylan, what are you thinking?
Well, here's the thing, is this guy had a very specific thesis in mind. I think Maynard brought enough facts to the table. It would have killed him to do a little research on this. I mean, Jesus, Maynard. No, but I think he brought enough to the table to show what the director's intention was. He wanted to make these nightmares that he had as a kid, that his viewers had, when they were kids. And frankly, I could say I've had nightmares like that where like the adults are missing and you can't get out, and as not to play the parent card, but as a parent, this is a huge nightmare that my children could be trapped somewhere and I wouldn't have the ability to help them, that they'd be helpless. And let me tell you something, like when they decide like I could see my kids in this situation. If they woke up in the house with no doors, no windows, no parents, they would camp out in the living room and watch cartoons. They would eat bowls of cereal. They would play with their toys. They would pee
in a bucket.
Let me tell you something. My son would pee in a bucket downstairs before he would go upstairs,
even with the door open and a working toilet.
Because that's how scared he would be. That's how kids would react to that. So I thought, just bringing in that perspective, and it wasn't something talked about in court because I know neither litigant is a parent. But let me just tell you something. Watching this movie as a parent, that really hits. That really hits. But like I said too, I could relate to those nightmares as a child. Now, in defense of what Bobby was saying, like, do the subtitles take you out of the movie a bit? I think that's a bit fair. The movie does need more polish. What
about the lighting and the camera angles and stuff?
I thought that all added to the ambiance, as it was all creating the mood, right? Like,
it is about vibes.
It's a vibe movie.
Entirely built on vibes.
And you're supposed to feel uncomfortable. You're supposed to wonder, like, why are we lingering here? Like, and why is the sound mixed this way? Like, you almost kind of want to lean in, but then you can't because it gets too loud, So I just have to say, like, I thought Bobby brought up a good prosecution here, but I think Maynard just knocked it out of the park with the defense. And I was just able to relate to those points, and we weigh intentionality so heavily in this court. Like, this is not a mainstream movie. This is not a normal, this isn't like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie here. It is something really, really different, and maybe it's too much too soon. I don't believe anything can really be ahead of its time, but there's one movie like this, and I think it's pretty special, so that's where I'm leaning. What are you thinking, Big Ben?
Before coming into the case, I was very much against it, although I did love the concept. I thought the idea of like the abandonment, and I did sort of get the nightmare thing going on and the vibe. I liked that idea. I did not like that it was feature length. I thought, like, okay, when he's explaining that this guy came from YouTube and it's like all 10 minutes, that's fine. I could sit with this for 10 minutes. When it's extended,
yes, you can. Length, you can sit with it for 10 minutes. It's it being a feature length that bugs you. That's what makes it hard, and that's what the point is. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. You're like, when will this nightmare end? And not nightmare because the movie's
But that's
bad,
not the nightmare the right way.
It's
it's not nightmare because I'm scared of the plot. I'm scared because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just staring at the ceiling and counting my teeth with my tongue. This thing is just repetitive and the same angles are being shown again and again.
I don't know. I think if it strikes that chord with you, though.
Well, I agree. I think that tone is fine. It's the feature length. You're right.
And that was the audience he was making this movie for. I think Maynard did a good job of proving that point. I don't think that was disproven. I don't think he came out and said, look, this is going to be the next Barbie movie, or this is going to be the next Oppenheimer. Like, this is a very niche movie for a very niche audience that won't have broad-based appeal. But then we get back, is this the whole olives thing? We know I don't like olives, but that doesn't mean olives are bad. So is that where this movie's landing? Like, I didn't like it, but you can respect the fact that he was swinging and going for that niche and seemingly connecting really well based on the fact that it made $2 million. I mean, that's not chump change.
All right, let's start locking in, guys. Ben?
As much as I'm loath to say it, because I did not enjoy sitting through this movie, I think that the defense case was a bit stronger. I do get, like, having it explained to me this came from YouTube. That makes perfect sense. I think there is a place for it, although I will never watch it again. I will never recommend it to anyone. But it succeeded in what it tried to do. It was a financial success, and that tone does stay with you. That vibe stays with you. Hate it, but not guilty.
Gee, Dylan, I wonder which way you're going to lean.
Well, I'm going to do my classic Schlender swerve, brought to you by Schlenzo D. No, I look, I will admit that I had a lot of biases coming in to this movie because I really, really liked it the first time I saw it. But I wasn't to give Maynard a freebie, but he brought the receipts, he brought the facts, and he made the case that, frankly, I would have made that I wanted to hear. And I love Bobby, but this is not the worst. Like, man, not even close. This is 100% not guilty.
Well, I loved Rob's case. I was swayed more than I thought I would be. But I don't want this to be unanimous because I
Why
did
not?
not like this movie. I just didn't like it. And I can't give it a not guilty. If there's already 2 not guilty verdicts, can't be unanimous.
I think it
So,
should be unanimous.
No, I can't do that. So I'm going to go
Bowing to the
guilty.
barbarians.
Going guilty.
All right.
Let's go tell that very handsome judge.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Skinamarink, we find that Ben not guilty of being a bad movie.
Unbelievable.
Very believable.
Upset of the century. The verdict is so rendered, but
Yes.
since Skinamarink has dependency issues, Mr. Maynard, since you care about it so much, you're sentenced to keep it company for every minute of every day. Court is adjourned.
This is the devil. When are you gonna send some movies to me? But I am also reporting you live from outside the reels of justice. Bouncin Bobby LePire, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict?
I don't see whatever vibes the jury's talking about at all. This movie doesn't have vibes. It has static shots of boringness happening. There's nothing that happens. And I don't need a plot. I need fucking context so I care about what's happening. That's different. Thank you very much. I gotta go drink myself into oblivion now. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, no, Bobby, you don't drink.
No. And here comes Maynard Bangs. Excuse me, could we get a word on how you feel about today's verdict?
Very happy, really happy. Oh, by the way, you need to tell them that you're a white devil.
What?
You're white devil. I know. You're the white devil,
my
okay?
God. No, I have literally been saying white devil all day. I'll have to tell you why later.
Please do. I love this movie. I was so passionate when Bobby told me he hated it. I knew it had to go hell on reels this season. I love this movie pretty much since I watched it with Schlender. And writing this case made me like it more. Being able to like see his progression as an artist from his first video through like 40 of them. Really interesting. I am interested to see what he will do next too. But I'll just close on Skinamarink, dink, Skinamarink, doo. I love you.
Thank you. That's all we
You gotta
have
tell him you're white.
on us. Today, I am El Blanco Diablo. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis.
Batman, ladies and gentlemen, Batman.
You're not Yoda.
I know. I could do a better.
You gotta
double,
hurry
but
up,
I
Bobby.
gotta
What have you
get
been
something to
up
drink.
to? We've been.
What vibes does this movie have?
already talked
I
about
wanna
this
fucking
movie.
know. It doesn't have vibes.
Bobby, did you ever like
Yeah.
have a nightmare and have to like sneak off to your parents' room in the middle of the night?
No.
Oh, see, that explains a shit ton, Bobby.
But see, that's the
'Cause that
problem.
that
a
was
horror
just the
movie
base
should
question.
scare you no
Because-
matter what.
Because
and
then
this
what I
doesn't.
was gonna add, no, that is not true. Like,
Absolutely.
I
I
know, but
should be.
vampires aren't
I should
scary.
be-
yeah, like vampires and werewolves don't really scare me. Werewolves a little bit more.
But you should be creeped out or at least interested in what's
I'm
going
way
on,
more
and I'm
creeped
not.
out about a thing taking away doors. We've talked about that
We've discussed
movie.
this. We've discussed
Yeah.
this.
All right.
Bobby, tell us what you've been doing.
Well, how have I been doing? Since I was last here, that was John Carter. I went to Dragon Con. Hadn't been since 2019 for obvious COVID reasons. So it was really lovely to go back. It was great and busy and exhausting in all the most amazing ways it can be. Watching movies, reviewing movies. Several film festivals are happening right now.
Reviewing
So
movies for
it's-
who?
Sorry, what was
Your
that?
last
Who are
one.
you reviewing
Last
movies
one.
for?
Oh, for Film Threat.
Hey, all right.
Let's hit the buzzer. Whoa, there's the sound effect.
Ding, 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 ding.
So lots of film festivals happening there. Toronto International Film Festival, Lorcano just started. Fantastic Fest. Um,
Which one are you most excited for?
Fantastic Fest.
All right, well, we're gonna jump to our recommendations. We always ask for our guests for recommendations of movies that you think people should see. It's spooky season, so you got to give us a horror or spooky movie.
I'm gonna give you a better version of Skinamarink.
I'm interested in seeing that.
It came out in the same year. It came out in 2023. I know you guys said 2022, but IMDb is always wrong about that sort of thing. It hit theaters 2023. That's when it was up for public consumption. 2023 movie. This is Innis Min. I presume I'm pronouncing that right. Written and directed by Mark Jenkin. It takes place on a small island off the Cornish coast where we follow the main lady. I don't know that she has a name. If they say it, I don't remember it, but it's played by Mary Woodvine. And it's just all atmospheric shots of the coast. We're sort of following what she's doing every day. We see her do repetitive actions. And then one day something weird happens to break those repetitive actions. But then they kind of start back up. And then two weird things happen to stop those repetitive actions. And at night, she's having these crazy nightmares. It's sort of like, what if Skinamarink had an actual plot and gave you context and a character you cared about to follow?
I wish you cared about children, Bobby.
I cared about
I love children. I just
Monster.
didn't care what happened to them because there was no context for me to care.
They're 4. That's the context. He's 4 and he's innocent. He's a child.
He fell down the stairs.
What vibe were you talking about?
Big whoop.
Now, so my recommendation this week is one I thought we'd already done, but according to the recommendations of Justice on Letterboxd, we have not. Mandy from 2018. When high-spirited Mandy is murdered by a deranged cult group, her boyfriend Red Miller, played by Nick Cage, must avenge her. I was reminded of this film because, like Skinamarink, it also played at the Fantasia International Film Festival, although the 2018 iteration. And it's also another weird one where you might ask, what the hell is going on, like half the time? Several scenes, the protagonist is just tripping his balls off. But I know I enjoyed it when I saw it, though I'm probably due for a revisit now that the hype has died down a bit. But one thing's for sure, this movie is basically single-handedly responsible for reinvigorating Nick Cage's career. What was Nick Cage's last big movie before this? Spoilers, more than half of his work prior to this went straight to on-demand streaming. So if nothing else, thank you, Mandy, for reminding us and Nicolas Cage what we love so much about Nicolas Cage.
I love Mandy.
That's true.
She's a fine girl.
And Big Bun.
Brandy.
What a good wife she would be.
Brandy, that's Brandy.
Throw more brandy.
Oh no, Mandy came and she gave without taking, but I sent her away. So Big Ben, what's your recommendation?
I don't think my recommendation will earn me many respect points in the film community, but after I recently told someone that Almost Heroes was a guilty pleasure of mine, they looked at me as if I said I was marrying Cleopatra and our wedding would be on a secret moon base. So I figured I'll pull a DJS and really lean into it, even though Letterboxd would put this as a gentleman's 6. So there you go. And I'm not even going to tell you what it is until the end. I want to see if you can guess, but it's probably pretty obvious. There was one film that constantly was crossing my mind when watching Skinamarink, and some of the complaints against today's defendant might also apply to what also came from this one. And although I loathe what this film turned into, I still can't deny that the first time I saw it, I was enamored. This was back in the days when I didn't live close to a major movie theater, so I would have to drive an hour away and do a double or triple feature for whatever was new that I was interested in. And this film was the first of the bunch for that day, followed by Zombieland, in a 1-hour drive home, a making of dinner, and probably a 3-hour session of playing Final Fantasy or something. Even after all of that, as the night fell and the wind began to bang on my screen at the window, I couldn't help but feel a little creeped out thanks to this movie. While I was never a believer in the supernatural in my adulthood, ghost hunting was always one of my favorite pastimes, and the show Ghost Hunters ruled my background noise. And all this fed directly into why I love this film so much. And by now, I'm sure you're able to guess that the film that I'm referring to is...
I don't know, Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity. And while the sixth film had a 3D VCR cameras and a ghost dimension that I'm still ashamed to say that I saw in theaters, yes, this was the one that made found footage an overused genre. I still think that the fact that it was able to inspire so much is worthy of a entry into the recommendations of Justice.
I love Paranormal Activity.
I've only seen the second one.
Huh.
I like the
first
first 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first one's really
it's
good.
the
Second one's
Nickelback
pretty
effect.
good. Third one's pretty good.
Well, the stories get similar, but the point is the static shot found footage stuff that kind of tripped
And the
around
repetitive nature of it. Yeah.
became very creepy. The repetitive nature. I really like. I think it's Apollo 18, the one they do in space. I like.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah,
interesting.
That's like
Yeah.
a good one that they do with it. But I remember the first
better
time I
than
saw Paranormal
Skinamarink.
Activity, I was so scared I had to tell everyone about it. Same when I saw Skinamarink, because it's just as good. All right,
Just 'cause you hate people, I know,
Schlenzo,
right?
what have you got?
Hey, Maynard, you know why I'm not recommending 2007's The Messengers?
Because you're an asshole?
That's right. No scarecrows. But they rectified that in the sequel, Messengers 2, The Scarecrow from 2008.
Oh, good.
Imagine a struggling farmer, aptly played by Norman Reedus of Walking Dead fame, doing everything he can to save his farm, even hanging up a cursed scarecrow that starts to turn his luck around. But imagine my horror, nay, disgust, when the movie tried to make it look like that Norman Reedus was just crazy. Thankfully, the movie ditches that, and indeed, the Scarecrow is alive and is the real monster.
Yay.
I know, it was a close one. Wilford Brimley is in it and has a hilarious death scene. You'll love this movie. The Scarecrow is ultimately killed with the power of family, but don't worry, they left the wide open for a sequel, because why the hell not? It's never going to happen. The movie could come out in 2009, streaming where else but Tubi.
Never
Support
say
your
never.
local
You
library.
don't know. The popularity it gains after this. Right, guy, what have you got?
My spooky recommendation this week concerns the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which will start to lean harder into horror in the coming years with motion pictures like Blade, and it's a special Halloween season hour-long short, 2022's Werewolf by Night, my favorite Marvel project since Loki Season 1. Shot in crisp, digital, black and white, evoking the expressionist Universal Monsters aesthetic, it features great turns from Gael Garcia Bernal, former guest in this courtroom Kirk Thatcher, being brutally dispatched, and of course, the long-awaited first appearance of Man-Thing. Marvel composer Michael Giacchino, whose next project I am waiting for with bells on, serves in his directorial debut. Given who owns Marvel, you should be able to discern where it can be found, but until the strike is officially over, you'll just have to guess. That's Werewolf by Night.
On Disney Plus. Thank you,
Gentleman by day, Werewolf by night.
I love Ted.
That's right. And I can't believe it. They dispatched the Thatch.
Dispatch the Thatch. I love it.
Can't abide it.
Dispatch the Thatch.
Patent pending.
The werewolf did a Vulcan
anyway,
nerf pinch on him.
We are all out of show, but what a tremendous, successful, and justice-filled episode we had. We want to thank Bouncin Bobby LePire for joining us. Thank you, Bobby.
Please come back, sir.
I promise you I'll come back.
All right.
If you'd like to try to spank me in person, good luck next time.
Well, that'll be happening soon, actually.
But we hope that you'll join us again next time, and we hope everyone else will too, as the Reels of Justice, Hell on Reels, keeps burning.
Down it.
Dispatch the Thatch!
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.